You're listening to Leadership Recalibrated, where we dismantle outdated leadership playbooks and explore the new way to lead. I'm Lori Lalonde, founder of Her Executive Ascent, and I created this podcast because I was tired of hearing the same recycled advice about what it takes to be a good leader. You know the scripts: be more confident, lean in, develop executive presence. But what if those scripts were written for a leadership model that no longer works? What if the future of leadership looks less like commanding authority and more like strategic influence, emotional intelligence, and authentic power? Each week, we take on the questions most leadership programs avoid, the power dynamics nobody teaches, and the decisions that actually shape your career. This is where you stop following the old rules and start designing the leadership career that fits who you are now and where you're going next. Let's recalibrate. Welcome. You're listening to Leadership Recalibrated, a leadership insight series from Her Executive Ascent. I'm Lori Lalonde, and this is the show where we have the real conversations about what it actually takes to lead without the noise and without pretending the playing field is level, because we know it's not. If you're new here, welcome. This show exists for women who are building their careers with intention, navigating leadership on their own terms, and refusing to shrink to fit spaces that were never designed for them. Every episode, we go deep on one thing, and today that one thing is artificial intelligence, specifically what the research actually says about women and AI in the workplace. And I promise you, it is not what the LinkedIn thought leaders are telling you. New technology, old patterns. That's something Sheryl Sandberg recently said. And after 30 years in tech, I could say that, yeah, that tracks. I mean, the more I read about AI and gender in the workplace, the more I think it might be the most honest and most uncomfortable way to describe what's actually happening right now. New technology, old patterns. And that's what we're unpacking today. So, I think we are having an incomplete conversation about AI in the workplace, and it is an expensive one. We talk constantly about what AI can do, and we hear a lot around efficiency gains and that it's disruptive and it's the future of work and it's going to multiply productivity. Don't get me wrong, those conversations matter. But underneath all of that is a layer we keep skipping over about who gets to benefit from AI, who gets penalized for using it, and whose jobs are first in line to be automated away. And when you look at that layer carefully, when you actually read the research, what you find is that AI, this supposed great equalizer, is reproducing and in some cases amplifying the same inequities that women have been navigating for decades. And I want to be clear up front. This is not like a doomsday episode. This is not AI is bad for women, avoid it. The opportunity AI represents for women is real, and we are going to get into that. The problem is not AI. The problem is the conditions under which AI is being implemented. And if we don't name those conditions, if we just say, go learn AI and consider it conversation over, we will have missed a historic opportunity to actually get this right. So, three things I want to cover today. First, the adoption gap. Second, what I'm calling the competence penalty. And this is the finding that we are hearing about more often now. Third, what we actually do about it. So let's start with the baseline. I dug into the research, and one of the ones that I read was a Harvard Business School meta analysis that pulled together 18 separate studies, more than 140,000 people across 25 countries. And across all of those contexts, across different industries, different geographies, different occupational categories, they found one near universal pattern. Women had approximately 22% lower odds of using generative AI than men. And this was ubiquitous across the globe. It's not specific to a country or an industry. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York in its own survey and found that roughly half of men had used generative AI in the previous 12 months, compared to about a third of women. And if you're in Canada, that's where I'm based. A 2026 survey by Monday Girl, fielded through Angus Reid, with over 1,500 respondents, found that only 36% of women felt confident using AI tools compared to 52% of men. And 47% of women felt intimidated by AI tools versus 33% of men. So that confidence gap matters more than it might look. Confidence is often what separates someone who experiments with a new tool from someone who waits to be told it's safe to use. Now, before we go further, I want to talk about what's actually driving that gap. because the easy narrative, the lazy narrative, is that women are risk averse or less tech comfortable or just slower to adopt new tools. That is completely wrong. And the research calls it out explicitly. So here's what's actually happening. Women are 32% more likely than men to worry that using AI at work will be seen as cheating, as evidence that they couldn't do the work on their own. That fear is doing a lot of work. Women are 30% less likely to be praised by managers for incorporating AI into their work than male colleagues are. LeanIn's research on this is evident, and I will link it in the show notes. It shows that this is what's actually happening. The social signal women are getting from their organizations is this is not something we reward you for. So let's talk about that. Every corporation's pushing their employees to use AI, be more efficient with AI. And yet, when women are using AI, they're getting penalized for it. And when they're not using AI, they're getting penalized for it because they're not using AI. Absolutely ridiculous. This is a new double bind, and it is pissing me off. I think it's time that organizations start acknowledging the fact that the odds against women are constantly stacked no matter what they do, and they need to do something about that rather than putting out articles or putting out sound bites that women just are not adopting AI. Women are also 38% more likely to express ethical reservations about AI, concerns about accuracy, privacy, bias. And that's not a weakness, that's responsibility. And it is slowing adoption, but for the right reasons. I mean, this is what I am teaching in my programs for women in leadership. How you take the time to evaluate these artificial intelligence tools and services for value, fit, and risk. We need to slow down. This is a powerful technology. This is not something that we just throw caution to the wind. And women are prone to be very level headed in these scenarios, to understand the risk and implications, to ask the questions that need to be asked, to ensure that it is used responsibly and ethically, and that there is a rollback plan in place in case things go wrong. I mean, those are real risks of this technology. And the fact that they want to be more pragmatic about the adoption by actually following a process to assess risk and return on investment and to ensure that guardrails are put in before it is rolled out. I think that's a leadership quality that should be acknowledged and valued and celebrated. So here's one thing that I do think is important. Harvard researchers confirmed that women face greater penalties for being judged as not having expertise. So, their fear of using AI is founded, first of all. Second of all, that resonates because as a woman in the corporate world for almost 30 years, I can tell you it didn't matter the amount of experience I had day in and day out. I had to consistently prove that I belonged, that I was just as smart and capable as my male counterparts. So, the fact that women are still experiencing this doesn't infuriate me. It absolutely infuriates me. And now they're being penalized for it. They're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. Absolutely ridiculous. So, in the Harvard study, even when access to AI tools was fully equalized, women and men were given identical access, training, and opportunity. Women still adopted it at lower rates. That tells us the barriers are not about access, they're social and they're structural, which means access only solutions by just giving everyone the tools doesn't fix this. This is exactly why I built Action Driven Leadership, AI powered foundations for first time managers, and the AI enabled Executive Decision Lab for women in director roles and above. Because if you are either stepping into a leadership role right now or preparing to go from senior leadership to executive roles, you're trying to figure out how to use AI with confidence, without apology, and in a way that actually builds your credibility rather than undermining it. Those courses were made for exactly this moment. It's not a tech tutorial, it's a leadership framework that puts AI in your hands as a decision making tool from day one. The link is in the show notes. Now, I want to show you something that I think reframes this entire conversation because there's a generational assumption baked into how most people think about technology gaps. The assumption is younger people will naturally close these gaps. They are the digital natives, they've grown up with technology. But what the data actually shows is that among workers aged 18 to 24, The youngest cohort in the workforce right now, 71% of young men use AI tools weekly, 59% of young women do. That's a 12-point gap. So, among people who grew up with smartphones, who have never worked without the internet, the group where we expected parity shows the widest gap of any cohort in the research. Why does this matter? Because if we can't close the gap in the generation for whom technology has always been native, it's a signal that we are dealing with something far more durable than a generational handoff. We're dealing with structural patterns that reproduce themselves regardless of age unless we deliberately interrupt it. Okay, so that's the adoption gap. Now let's talk about what happens to the women who do use AI. This is the part I want you to remember when this episode is over because this is, I believe, the most important and the least discussed dynamic in the entire AI and gender conversation. Researchers from Hong Kong Polytechnic University embedded themselves inside a global technology company. The company launched an internal AI adoption campaign. So over 12 months, they tracked just over 1,000 software engineers. At the start of the study, male and female adoption rates were separated by about 4 percentage points. But by month 12, the gap had tripled to 12 percentage points, despite every effort to push adoption equally. But that's not even the main finding. The research team ran a controlled experiment. They asked reviewers to evaluate code. The code was identical. The quality was identical. The only variables were, was the engineer male or female, and had AI been used? Men who used AI received competence ratings about 6% lower than men who didn't. A modest penalty, the kind you might expect when any new tool gets associated with shortcuts. But women who used AI received competence ratings 13% lower, more than double the penalty for the same work, producing the same result. And the most infuriating finding among male engineers who didn't use AI themselves, the non adopters, they penalize women AI users 26% more harshly than they penalize men who use the same tools. Same work, same tool, same output, but a different verdict based entirely on gender. So, this is what I mean by the competence penalty, and the research is clear on why it's gendered. The first mechanism is attribution bias. LeanIn explains this really well. I'll link to their piece in the show notes. It's worth a read. Women already receive less credit for the same contributions as men. So when AI enters the picture, that bias gets a new lens because technology is still culturally coded as a male domain. So a woman's use of AI gets interpreted as evidence she couldn't succeed on her own, rather than as evidence she knows how to use the tool strategically. The same behavior reads differently depending on who's doing it. The second mechanism is stereotype activation. Dr. Erin Ling, an AI and workforce researcher at the University of Surrey, puts it plainly. In uncertain scenarios, people revert to stereotypes. AI is uncertain. Most people don't fully understand it yet. So when they're evaluating work involving AI and the engineer is a woman, the stereotypes start firing off. And then there's the recognition asymmetry. LeanIn's 2026 survey found that men are 27% more likely to be commended by management for using AI, which means women are caught in a genuine double bind, as I mentioned earlier. They get penalized when AI use is visible, and they get undercredited when their AI-assisted work produces results. The rational response to this environment, and this is exactly what the Harvard research found, is avoidance. The people most vulnerable to the competence penalty are the least likely to adopt AI because they know that they're not going to be rewarded for the adoption of the tool. So the loop is self-reinforcing, like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And here's why that should concern us. The groups standing to benefit the most from AI, who have the most to gain from a 40% productivity lift, from having the administrative office housework automated away, from having a tool that equalizes access to knowledge, those are the same groups that are being systematically pushed out of using it. And I want to add another layer here because bias isn't just in how AI use gets perceived by managers, it's in the AI systems themselves. A 2025 study published in Nature, researchers from UC Berkeley, Stanford, and Oxford found that when ChatGPT generates resumes, it presents women as less experienced and younger than male counterparts. even when starting from identical information. Separate testing of large language models for salary negotiation advice found that identical prompts, where it differs only in gender of the person asking, produced a recommended salary difference of more than $100,000. AI credit scoring systems have been shown to disadvantage women, contributing to what researchers document as a $17 billion gender credit gap. UNESCO's analysis of large language models found they consistently associate women with home, family, and children, and men with executive and business. So, this tells you that AI is not neutral. It was trained on data from an unequal world, and it reflects that world back at us in hiring decisions, in performance evaluations, in salary recommendations, and at scale. And then there's the displacement question, not just the social dynamics of how AI use is perceived, but the hard structural question of which jobs AI is most likely to automate. The International Labor Organization analyzed data across countries, and 88% of countries studied, women's jobs are more exposed to generative AI than men's jobs. 29% of jobs in female dominated occupations face AI exposure, compared to 16% in male dominated occupations. LeanIn identified approximately 6 million U.S. workers least positioned to recover from AI related job loss, and 86% of them are women, concentrated in clerical work, administrative support, customer service. Those are exactly the roles with the highest rates of task automation. McKinsey data shows that women's share of tech roles, the sector best positioned to shape and navigate the AI transition, fell from 22% in 2023 to 19% in 2026. So let me name what we're describing here. Women are being penalized for using AI. They're receiving less organizational support and recognition for AI adoption. They're disproportionately in the jobs most at risk of automation, and they're underrepresented in the roles best positioned to benefit from the transition. That's not one problem. That is an avalanche of problems. That is a system that compounds against women's best interests, career interests, financial interests. Absolutely unacceptable. Now, I want to talk about the upside because the opportunity here is genuinely real and the research shows it. Among female developers surveyed across 61 countries, 64% say AI is accelerating their careers. Faster learning, better problem solving, more confidence in tackling challenges they previously would have had to route to more senior colleagues. In the tech sector specifically, 44% of women have moved past experimentation into actively using AI on projects, compared to only 33% of men in the same sector. We don't see any articles about that, though, do we? When women have access and when the social environment supports adoption, they don't just adopt, they surpass their male peers in adoption speed. Seriously, like where are the sound bites on this statistic? So AI has the direct potential to reduce the invisible tax women pay in most organizations, which is the administrative coordination, the meeting scheduling, the note taking, the relationship management. It's the office housework, or what I call the organizational caretaking responsibilities that research consistently shows falls disproportionately on women. Automating that frees time and cognitive bandwidth for the higher visibility, high impact work that actually drives advancement. So the opportunity is real. The question is whether the conditions will be created to let women access it equally. And this is where I want to speak directly to the women who are already in senior or executive roles, because your position in this conversation is different and the stakes are different too. You are the visible woman AI champion the research says can change outcomes for junior women in your organization. You are also the person making decisions about how AI gets evaluated, deployed, and credited on your team. That's why I created the AI-enabled Executive Decision Lab specifically for women in senior leadership who want to move beyond basic AI adoption and into using AI as a genuine strategic and decision-making advantage. It's about leading in the AI era with authority. If that's where you are in your career, that's your next step. The link is in the show notes. And that's what we're getting to now. So here's what we do about it. And I'm going to be practical here. There's not going to be a vague call to do better because That does not work. Specific actions are what's needed in this moment, and there is research behind each one. First, let me start with what organizations can do. They can shift to outcome based evaluation. This is the single highest leverage structural change available. If you evaluate what was achieved rather than how it was achieved, you remove the surface on which the competence penalty operates. The reviewer can't penalize someone for using AI if the evaluation criteria asks only about the results. That closes the attribution gap as well. The credit goes to whoever produced the outcome. Next, create visible women AI champions. This is not about optics. This is about having a measurable effect. When senior women publicly and visibly champion AI adoption, the competence penalty decreases significantly for junior women employees because visibility breaks the stereotype. It changes the social signal from AI as a male coded tool to AI as something our best leaders use. If you are a senior woman and you're listening to this, that is a role you can step into right now without anyone's permission. Third, fund equitable AI training. Canadian research specifically identifies lack of structured training access, not lack of interest, as a root cause of the adoption gap. Employer funded, structured AI upskilling programs, particularly those designed for mid career women, show measurable outcomes on adoption rates. Fourth, audit and bias test AI systems before deployment. If you're using AI in hiring, performance reviews, or compensation, and 42% of companies globally are, you need to know whether those systems are encoding gender bias. UNESCO published a red teaming playbook in 2025 specifically to help organizations do this. Don't assume neutrality, test for it. And now, directly to the women listening, you don't have to wait for your organization to get this right. Make your AI contributions visible. Attribution bias is a fight you can partially win through narration. When you complete a project with AI assistance, name it. I used AI to analyze the data set, which freed up 3 days to focus on the strategic analysis. Documenting your judgment, your tool use, and your results, and you're making it harder for reviewers to erase your contribution. Seek environments where AI use is celebrated, not penalized. This is now a real factor worth assessing when you evaluate employers or consider internal moves. Ask in interviews, how does this organization support AI adoption? Who are the senior women here who openly use these tools? The penalty is measurably lower in organizations where AI is normalized and modeled by women at the top. Build peer learning communities. The research consistently shows peer learning as the fastest adoption accelerator. Find your community and learn together. The confidence gap closes significantly when people learn in groups with shared context. And develop AI era skills deliberately. Prompt engineering, AI ethics, human AI collaboration, these are real emerging valuable skill sets. If you're currently in a role with high displacement exposure, you have a window right now to build skills that will be increasingly scarce and increasingly valued. That window will not stay open indefinitely. Before I close, I want to name the root cause, because without naming it, everything else is symptom management. Women make up only 22% of AI professionals globally, below 14% at senior levels. That means the people best positioned to notice gender bias in AI systems, to question the training data, to flag the outputs, to redesign the models are systematically underrepresented in the rooms where those decisions are made. The result is a feedback loop. Biased AI reflects biased training data, which reflects a world that has historically undervalued women's contributions. And AI amplifies those patterns at scale in systems that feel objective because they're algorithmic. But for the ones that it impacts, we know it's not objective. The UN Global Compact said it best. Inequality is not being addressed. It is being redesigned. AI adoption gaps that form now will translate into productivity gaps, promotion gaps, pay gaps, and representation gaps 5 years from now. Not because AI is inherently biased against women, but because we are allowing it to arrive in an environment that was already unequal without adequate intervention. For leaders, outcome-based reviews, visible champions, equitable training, bias-tested systems, these are not complicated. They are a choice. For women, name your contributions, build your community, find environments that reward your competence. Don't wait for the organizations to get ready. For everyone, demand diverse AI teams, require bias audits, close the representation gap in the rooms where AI is built. Because 22% is not representation, it's a warning sign. New technology, old patterns. We've changed patterns before in medicine, in law, in corporate leadership. It may have not been perfect or complete, but there was measurable change. We can do it again, but only if we decide to. Okay, here's where I want to land with this. The research we covered today is not here to overwhelm you. And I came with receipts on purpose. It's here to ground you in the decisions about your career and your leadership in an AI era that is moving fast and, as we've seen, is not waiting for women to catch up. So let me give you your two clear next steps, depending on where you are. If you're a first time manager or you're stepping into leadership for the first time, action driven leadership, AI powered foundations for first time managers is where you start. It will give you the foundation you need to lead with AI confidently, strategically, and in a way that builds your credibility from the jump. Not just how to use the tools, but how to lead with them, how to evaluate them, how to use them responsibly, ethically, and how to verbalize that and model that to your teams. And if you are already in a senior or executive role, the AI enabled Executive Decision Lab is built for you. This is about using AI as a strategic advantage in the decisions that actually matter at your level. Not efficiency hacks, but executive level judgment sharpened by AI. The links for both of those programs are in the show notes. Both of them were built by women for women who are done waiting for the system to catch up. You don't have to figure this out alone. That's it. That's the episode. If it resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. This conversation needs more airtime, not less. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you're listening there. It genuinely helps this show reach more women who are navigating exactly this. And come find us at herexecutiveascent.com and on LinkedIn and Instagram. That's where we're at. I'll put the links in the show notes. I want to hear what you're seeing in your workplace and what topics you want us to dig into next. In the meantime, take up space out there. You've earned it. I'll see you in the next episode. The leadership advice that got many women this far will not necessarily get them where they want to go next. This phase of your career is not about working harder. It's about working strategically by deciding which rules still apply and which ones you are finally ready to outgrow. If this conversation resonated, stay with us, subscribe to the podcast, and join me here every Sunday for new episodes. And if it gave you language for something you've been carrying quietly, share it with another woman in your network who needs to hear it too. Until next time, lead with intention, question everything, and change the rules for the better. I'm Lori Lalonde, and this is Leadership Recalibrated.